The rumors are true, the year of the handheld is upon us, but it's not just the handheld from Nintendo. It's Sunday, so let's get sensational. I'm Mike, and I'm back to talk about the gaming news. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of Switch 2 news to cover since it was fully revealed on the 2nd, and I already did a video that will be linked above talking about my initial thoughts on the hardware. But before we talk any further about the Switch 2, I'd like to switch to the Xbox really quick because they're also rumored to be releasing a handheld this year. I covered the rumor a few weeks ago that Xbox is partnering with a gaming OEM to make an Xbox branded handheld, and they'd be working closely on them with the design and the interface and all that stuff. But it looks like we finally know who they're partnering with. So a few days before the Switch 2 reveal, Asus put out a small teaser trailer of something that they're working on. It basically had an ROG Ally and one of their Xbox controllers, and both of them go into machine and then they combine, and you see like kind of a cartoonish silhouette of what we assume is some kind of Xbox handheld. Now, if it wasn't obvious enough with the Xbox controller and the ROG Ally combining, the Xbox account on Twitter reacted to the teaser trailer, so yeah, it looks like Asus is most likely the one releasing an Xbox handheld this year. Considering that they showed the ROG Ally, we can assume the device is probably going to be similar to that, plus it's an easy transition since they already used the Xbox controller layout for the Ally anyway. I am interested to see what they do with the handheld. I'm hoping it's not just an ROG Ally X with a color swap because that'd be kind of boring. And they really need the hype behind this thing because the Switch 2 is just around the corner and they're going to be going up against that. But before we talk any more about the Switch 2, we have to take a detour down layoff lane. And this week it's Eidos-Montréal. So Eidos-Montréal is probably most recently known for the Guardians of the Galaxy game, but they also did the Deus Ex and Thief series. They were previously owned by Square Enix before being sold to Embracer Group in 2022. And around that time, it was reported that they were working on a new Deus Ex game, which was reportedly canceled in early 2024, resulting in 97 people being laid off in March of the same year. Well, now they've announced they're laying off 75 members of their studio staff. In the statement they put out, they made it clear that it wasn't because the people weren't talented, but basically they didn't have enough work on projects to move them somewhere else in the studio. They also mentioned that they're going to be offering support to the employees during the transition and that they're still going to deliver on the other projects they currently have in development. Now, the PC Gamer article also mentioned that Crystal Dynamics laid off 17 employees a few days prior to this, and they're also very similar to Eidos-Montréal in that they were both part of Square and sold to Embracer Group in 2022. So both studios doing the layoffs may be a result of Embracer forcing them to make cuts. I think Eidos-Montréal handled this as best as they could, but like I've mentioned many times before when we talk about layoffs, it doesn't look like anything is going to change anytime soon, especially in the gaming space. All right, it's time to transition from the bad news and switch to more news about the Switch 2. So let's go ahead and talk about it today. And our final story. So Nintendo did their Switch 2 Direct on the 2nd, but there were many questions left unanswered. And since the Direct happened, more information has come out about the Switch 2, but the biggest thing that's happened since the Direct is a delay. So originally the Switch 2 pre-orders were going to start on the 9th, with the console releasing on June 5th. But due to the start of the tariffs in the US, Nintendo has decided to delay pre-orders. They said the console will still release on June 5th, and they will start pre-orders on a different date, which hasn't been disclosed just yet. I'm guessing it's so they can assess the situation and possibly adjust the pricing if they need to, which I'm really hoping they don't, but we really don't know what's going to happen with these tariffs starting up. Aubrey Quinn, the spokesperson for the ESA, did an interview with IGN about the tariffs, and they believe that it's going to have a detrimental impact on the gaming industry as a whole. And basically, the Switch 2 delay is just the beginning. They go on to mention that a lot of devices have components that are manufactured overseas, so the ESA is expecting the gaming industry to be hit hard. It's obviously one of those wait and see type things, but not in a good way. Like, I'm not looking forward to how this will impact gaming. All right, with the delay out of the way, I want to talk about some of the additional details that have come out since I recorded the Switch 2 video on Tuesday. And one of them is details about the NVIDIA chip that Nintendo is using. So I mentioned in that video that they're probably using some kind of upscaling to achieve 4K on the new system, and we assumed it would be DLSS since they're using an NVIDIA chip, And Nvidia has confirmed that the Switch 2 is indeed using DLSS for upscaling, which is great news for the Switch 2 because it's one of the best upscaling technologies for games right now. The other thing that they mentioned is the Switch 2 is capable of hardware ray tracing, which I really didn't expect, but yeah, the Switch 2 will use DLSS and have some kind of ray tracing ability. Now, realistically, I'm not expecting it to be as good as a PS5 or Xbox when it comes to the ray tracing features, but at least developers can incorporate some ray tracing elements into their games. Ray tracing is still a big performance hit, so even on PS5 and Xbox, it's kind of used sparingly. But I am interested to see if we see some ray tracing incorporated from third parties, like the Cyberpunk port that was announced for Switch 2 during the Direct. But of course, with all these new features and higher resolutions, people are wondering how big these game files are going to be on the Switch 2. Nintendo has upped the internal storage to 256 gigabytes, but on an Xbox or PlayStation, that would be like 2 to 3 games if we're talking about AAA releases nowadays. Well, we have an early idea of how large some of their titles might be, at least when it comes to Nintendo's first-party games. So the Japanese digital store for Switch has started listing Switch 2 games and their game sizes. So Mario Kart World is listed at 23.4 gigabytes, and Donkey Kong Bonanza is only 10 gigabytes. Assuming that Mario Kart World is like around the average game size for Switch, it might not be too bad. I mean, that would be most of the storage on a base Switch 1, but for a modern system, that isn't too bad. Now, of course, I don't expect third-party developers to be as conservative with file sizes, but it seems like it may be a consideration for first-party titles. And speaking of file sizes, the Switch 2 is also changing the way that they handle games that don't fit on the game cards. So Nintendo will have game cards that act as a key. For games that don't fit on the game card, you'll have to download the game and have the card inserted to play it. After the initial download of the game, it doesn't have to be connected to the internet to play. You basically just have to put in the game card as a way to authenticate that you own the game. Now, I think this is a better solution than what they did with some of the games on Switch 1, like Final Fantasy X and X-2, which had a download code for X-2. As long as it doesn't tie the game to a specific account, I think it's a better solution. PlayStation and Xbox have basically done it with all their physical games for the last 2 generations. I mean, technically it's been 3 for PlayStation, but either way, this makes sense for the games that are too big for the game cards. And like I said, it's basically on par with what the other consoles are already doing. And while we're on the topic of games, Nintendo confirmed a while ago that the Switch 2 is backwards compatible with Switch 1 games, and that is true. Kinda. So some additional clarification has been given on backwards compatibility when it comes to the Switch 2. The Switch 2 isn't able to run Switch games natively. They're using a combination of hardware and software emulation to run Switch games, which means some of the games may have issues when running on the Switch 2. There's currently a list of games that have compatibility issues that Nintendo is currently investigating. And of course, some of the games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are getting a Switch 2 edition upgrade, so obviously those won't have any issues. I wasn't expecting there to be any issues with backwards compatibility since they were still using an NVIDIA chip, but I guess the architecture is probably too different for what they had on the Switch to run the games flawlessly on Switch 2. Now, we really won't know how big of an issue this is until people get their hands on the Switch 2, but I'm hoping this is a minor thing. But a major issue from the Switch that a lot of people, myself included, experienced was stick drift. So Nintendo senior hardware development staff was asked during a QA if they addressed that with the Switch 2 design. And basically they said the Joy-Con 2 have been designed from the ground up to have bigger and smoother movement. So they didn't address the question at all, which isn't great. It seems like a lot of the stick drift on the Switch 1 was caused by dust and debris getting under the joystick. And it seems like there's kind of a dust cover on the Switch 2 controllers, so maybe they addressed it, but it would have been nice for them to clarify if they improved the durability of the sticks overall. But that's going to be a wrap for the Switch 2 hangover. Let me know how you feel in the comments overall about the Switch 2 announcement, the pricing, potential issues we talked about today. Again, let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button thing to be notified when I drop a video or a live stream. And always do at least 2 things at the same time.